Nancy Henriquez of Synetek Solutions is here to dive into stories from CompTIA, Action 1, and the 20, and the concept of a post-password future, plus a special guest interview with author Yvette Steele from DEI Insider on her new book called Impactful Inclusion Toolkit. It's ChannelPro Weekly, number 249. More money, more problems. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode number 249. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine show for folks out there like you. And who are you? You are the VARs, the IT integrators, the MSPs, the IT consultants, well, if you do stuff technology related with other businesses, you are in the right place. If you don't do that, well, you're going to learn about it anyway, and it's very interesting, and we have a lot of fun here. So hopefully you get something out of it. Joining me each and every week, most of the time when he's not gallivanting around the globe, is executive editor Rich Friedman.
Hello there, Matt. It's been hours and hours since we've seen each other.
Yes, it has been too long. No, actually, it hasn't been that long at all. How's your week going?
It's going well. It's going well. We are recording this episode the day after actually it's our final event of any kind in 2022. It was a virtual event, but that's it. It's a wrap on our events for 2022.
Yeah, well, you dove into how'd it go?
Well, you're asking me. No, it was a great day. I felt really, really good about the whole conference. This was our second Cybersecurity Online Summit event of 2022. We will be doing a couple of those next year as well. And just really great sessions. We had a whole bunch of incredibly smart security experts on talking about cyber insurance and stuff that they uncovered in pen tests and threat intelligence and all these other great topics. Those are long, hard days behind the scenes for Matt and the people who are live on the air moderating. I had a very stressful moment when Zoom died on me for about 5 seconds, but well worth it. It was just terrific stuff, and the day after, I'm still feeling really good about it.
Good, yeah, I thought it went really well, and yep, I know you had one little Zoom hiccup, but other than that, everything went pretty smooth and great. So it was awesome stuff. Yeah, well, we got a lot of show ahead. So why don't we go ahead and say that we are not alone. We are being joined by a fabulous returning guest host. She is the former CEO of Sabino CompTIA, an integrated outsourced IT department located in Katy, Texas, which emphasized on enterprise-level IT, managed services, consulting, and staff augmentation to SMB. They were acquired by the Synetek Group, which is a globally recognized leader in managed services, serving several large metropolitan areas. Please welcome the VP of Sales and Marketing at Synetek Solutions, Nancy Henriquez. Welcome, Nancy.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
It's great
Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. Great to have you back. I guess there's probably lots of things to ask you about, but I will point out that at the last time you were on, it was Nancy Sabino, but it is now not Nancy Sabino. So tell us about that.
Oh, that's the elephant in the room every time lately. Well, I decided to go back to my roots, and my partner and I parted ways amicably in more than one way. And so that's some of that life change there.
Okay, well, we won't dig too much into that, but I did pick up on the different name. But for those who may not have caught the last show that you were on, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about Synetek and what you do there?
Yeah, awesome. So I am the previous founder and CEO of Sabino CompTIA. In August of 2021. Geez, the years now they're just crumbling all together lately. We were acquired by Synetek Group, and I stepped in as the VP of Sales and Marketing. I have spearheaded our growth initiative through this year and going into next year, and it has been quite a ride. I am also the host of a podcast that's called Business Plus Tech Equals Success. And I basically dive into opening the IT closet doors is what I say in that podcast. And we talk about how business and technology together can create success, and why people should pay attention and talk about their IT as opposed to it kind of being hidden away in the IT closet typically. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I've been up to this year and what I do over at Synetek.
Very cool. Well, we've got a lot of show, and you're going to be with us for the whole part. But we got a bunch of stories we're going to talk about. We got news. We've got a really interesting interview coming up that I know that everyone will want to check out. So I'll give you quick little highlights for CompTIAs in the news. We got Action 1. We're going to be talking about the 20. We're going to be talking about passwords. This is going to be a very interesting discussion. But lots of really good stuff. So Rich, before we dive into the news, was there anything you wanted to catch up with Nancy on?
Well, yeah, there is actually, but it happens to dovetail perfectly with one of the news stories we're going to be talking about. So I will save that.
Ooh, let's save it and discover what happens as we go. So, well,
now I'm a little worried. Rich, I will not tell you my passwords.
That's funny. So, well, let's go ahead and get into the first one. The first one is about CompTIA. They made a big announcement actually at our event yesterday. So, Rich, tell us about that.
Yeah. So this is further proof, if anyone was needed, that you need to attend our shows, because sometimes news breaks during the show. And the announcement that CompTIA made yesterday was the soft launch of a new Trustmark, a new credential that's designed to sort of establish, to prove to the world that you follow security best practices. So let's step back a little bit here and look at the use case that they're addressing, right? One of the reasons that those cyber insurance company questionnaires are so long, and it's hard to get cyber insurance, it's hard to get tech D&O insurance, is that it's difficult for cyber insurance companies to kind of assess risk and understand the risk at this company relative to that company. And it's difficult for the people who are applying for any of this kind of coverage to prove in a sort of externally validated way that they're doing the right things. Now, there are standards out there. There are processes that you can go through as an IT provider to get that kind of certification, like, getting SOC 2 Type 2, getting a SOC 2 Type 2 audit done. That's pretty impressive to a lot of people. It says something about your company. It's also a really involved and typically very expensive process. So it's going to take a long time. You could wind up, at least according to CompTIA, you could easily wind up spending $25,000 on that process. Not everybody can or even really needs to do that. And so what CompTIA is kind of stepping in to do, and this is another example of the kind of thing that they will do sometimes that really nobody else in the industry is positioned to do, is they want to create something very specific to MSPs, very specific to channel pros out there, that will allow them to get some of that external validation, that certification that they embrace security best practices, in the hope that, and this is something that they will tell you, this is a 3-year, 5-year process. It begins with getting people embarked in the process of actually getting the Trustmark. But over time, the hope is that if they can kind of work with cyber insurance companies and promote and market and build familiarity around this Trustmark, that there will come a day when the insurance companies will simply see that you have this Trustmark from CompTIA and know that they can trust you to a greater degree than they can another company out here that doesn't. And so you're going to find it easier to get cyber insurance for your customers, easier to get tech E&O for insurance for yourself. The premiums will be lower, the limits might be higher. So that's sort of the long-term ambition. And then the other issue, of course, is if you are trying to win business with regulated companies or any company that happens to have particularly stringent security standards, those are the situations where SOC 2 Type 2 can be enormously helpful. And here's a more practical, approachable kind of alternative to that for a wider set of companies. So it is called the Cybersecurity Trustmark. I said it's soft launched as of yesterday, meaning it will formally launch. They believe the schedule is for it to formally launch next March. But there is a wait list, and if you click through to the article I wrote about this yesterday, you can click through from there to the wait list and add yourself to that. Eventually, when this launches in March, they'll start approaching the companies that want to do this off of the wait list. But for right now, it's something that they're kind of putting out there, they're introducing, they're collecting feedback on, they're piloting it with some people. What they did was go out to a lot of the frameworks that you have heard of, NIST and CIS and ISO 2700 and several others, and pull out a set of controls that are most applicable to MSPs. So an MSP specific set of controls, and then a set of controls that is rigorous and complete, but maybe not quite as complete as what you would need to have in order to get that SOC 2 Type 2. So the thought is that when you do qualify ultimately for the Cybersecurity Trustmark, you'll be maybe 60-70% of the way to SOC 2 Type 2. But this will be maybe a somewhat more palatable set of controls that you've adopted. Even just to get 60 to 70% of the way to SOC 2 Type 2 is not an easy thing. So they have this sort of 3-step process envisioned for how this is going to work. And the first thing you're going to do when you decide you want to earn the Trustmark is set foot down what they call the readiness path, because it's going to take some work even just to really begin getting audited or auditing yourself. And so you start on the readiness path. They will sort of buddy you up with a company that is maybe more mature in terms of cybersecurity than you are, and then help you kind of assess where you're at and get yourself to a point where you can then move on to step 2 in the process, which they are calling the self-attestation stage in this progression here. That's when you're essentially going to audit yourself. CompTIA is going to be forming an accreditation board that will ultimately decide who is or isn't worthy of the Trustmark. And during the self-attestation stage, the accreditation board will provide a little bit of oversight to make sure that you've done the right things in your self-audit there. But basically, you're doing that on your own. And then stage 3 is when you are fully audited. And at the completion of that process, if the accreditation board signs off, you get the Trustmark. And that audit, that final audit doesn't take, you're not doing that yourself. CompTIA is putting together a collection of certified third-party auditors who will come in and establish that you've checked off all the boxes and you've got all those controls in place. Costs have not, the fees associated with this have not been finalized yet. The hope right now is that to complete the self-attestation process is going to cost about $1,250. To complete the fully audited 3rd stage in the process will cost about $2,500. So this is not that onerous. Those fees will probably be, that's for anybody, basically. CompTIA members will pay less, how much less we don't know, but less than that at each stage. And so I guess the last thing to just point out here is, I mentioned they were pulling controls from frameworks, and CompTIA makes a point of emphasizing that what they're trying to build here is a standard and not a framework. So just as for example, Wayne Selk, who is the guy, he was on our show yesterday, the Cybersecurity Online Summit. He is absolutely driving this whole Trustmark process. He used to work for CompTIA, or excuse me, he works for CompTIA now. He used to work for ConnectWise up until very recently. And ConnectWise has an MSP specific framework that they created. And this does not replace that. It's not an alternative to that. It's very complementary to that, because they're not building a framework that will, replace other frameworks. They're building a standard. And so they're actually working with ConnectWise on some stuff that I don't know a lot about, but we might find out about apparently in 2023. So, just a very ambitious and interesting, and I think needed initiative by CompTIA, and it'll be really great to kind of watch this unfold over the course of the next few years.
Yeah, for one, I think I'm excited for something like this, and like, where do I sign up? Which you did mention where, so I'm gonna go look that up. But absolutely 100% needed for this industry to have some sort of there's people doing the right things, especially if we are being trusted with people's livelihoods. And if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, then how can we expect our customers to do what we want them to do in order to protect themselves?
Yeah, there's this over the last 5 years, like there really has been this giant shift to channel accountability, right? Is really what it is. It's saying, okay, it's been the Wild West for a long time, but now, you know, you're right. We're talking about livelihoods, full businesses. We're talking about all that stuff. Like there needs to be standards, there needs to be accountability in place to measure and to ensure that when you are a IT provider, you're providing what you're actually supposed to be doing, right? I mean, that's kind of, would you say that's kind of been the evolution, Nancy, the last say 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has definitely gone from, wing it to have a structure and a framework that you're following to now, I think, which is the final phase is, making sure that you are actually doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Rich, anything else you want to highlight from the story that's kind of important? There's a lot to get in here, a lot to go into with this one. And I think a lot of people are going to be very interested in it, but was there anything else that you wanted to kind of comment on?
I'll just add one little note that it was probably implied by what I said, but there are really three audiences that ultimately need to sort of be on board with the Trustmark. And the first one, and this is the one that they'll be focused on next year, is the MSPs, right? You got to get them into the process of earning the Trustmark, but then you need to teach end users out there to look for the Trustmark when they are evaluating MSPs they want to work with. And you need to work with the cyber insurance companies to get them to offer, easier access to coverage, lower premiums, higher limits, et cetera. And they're already, CompTIA is actually already in conversations with some cyber insurance companies about that. But it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to take a while to kind of promote this thing to all three of those audiences. But that's very much part of the roadmap Wayne has up in front of him.
Well, and CompTIA is they're a pretty big organization. If there's anyone that can build that out and get the kind of awareness, I think CompTIA is probably one of the ones to drive that home, I would think. Nancy, any other thoughts before we move forward?
Yeah, I think that the audience, the second and third audiences are hungry for something like this. So I think the timing is absolutely perfect.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll put a link to this story in the show notes page for this episode. You can usually, if you just open up the description area on your phone, you'll see all the links in there. If you're on YouTube, you can open the description area. We'll put the links there for you as well, and then you can go and get all the details and get all the all the different links and stuff like that so you can keep up on top of that. And all that story, of course, is on the ChannelProNetwork.com website. So go and check it out there. Our next story is about Action One. They've added a new feature to their RMM software. Rich, what did they add?
And this is a timely story, not an enormous one, but an interesting one, and definitely a timely one, given all the different unsavory ways RMM software has kind of figured into cybersecurity news in the last couple of years or so. I'm going to guess most people in our audience are probably not familiar with Action One, that name. And so just to set it up, you might be more familiar with a security vendor named Netwrix, Netwrix. They were acquired by private equity in 2020. The two people who founded that company then went off and founded a new RMM vendor named Action One. This was one of the companies that I put on this year's vendors on the Vanguard list. Once a year in the spring, I come up with a list of vendors you probably haven't heard of but might be interested in. This was one of the ones on the 2022 list. And so I've been in touch with them on and off again since then. And their PR folks reached out recently to tell me about this new feature they added to the system that they're calling threat actor filtering. And here's the particular use case that they are addressing here. One of the reasons, we all know that threat actors are trying to break into RMM software, because once you're in there, you have access to all of these end user devices at multiple businesses. It's a very efficient way to increase your sort of attack footprint, if you will. But you don't necessarily have to break into somebody's RMM system to take advantage of an RMM tool as an attack weapon. You could just buy and use RMM software yourself. And in fact, Action One, I'm sure all the RMM vendors see this, but Action One has sort of called out the fact that they will sometimes notice weird things happening with one of their customers in terms of how they're using the RMM software, and they will quickly figure out that this is not an MSP. This is a threat actor who bought the RMM software and is now using it to break into businesses and spread ransomware and other stuff. They would notice this was a manual process in the past. They would kind of notice weird things going on. They would realize this is a malicious account and they would shut it down. What they've done now is add an automated feature to the tool that, using artificial intelligence, is looking for that weirdness and then automatically suspending or removing those accounts. And so what kinds of things is it looking for? Just as a for example, well, it might be a little suspicious if somebody buys an RMM tool using an email address associated with a domain that was set up 5 minutes ago. That probably doesn't make a lot of sense, and because what these guys will do is go out and create some new domain and set up an email account and then immediately buy an RMM tool, and they're in business. So they're looking out for that. They're looking out for users who are maybe deploying agents on 100 different endpoints in 100 different businesses. Like, nobody is supporting one endpoint in 100 businesses, right? That's maybe a red flag. They're looking for businesses that will set up, deploy agents on 100 endpoints, and then 2 weeks later, delete all those endpoints and put 100 new ones in there. Because, now obviously they've moved on to a new wave of victims. So there are certain behaviors they've learned to look for, and that AI can learn to look for, and additional behaviors the AI can learn that will tell them, we really shouldn't be selling RMM software to this company out there. And so in and of itself, I think that's interesting. I think it's kind of commendable. I honestly don't know how many other RMM tools have something like this. And so if there are RMM vendors out there who are thinking, well, we've been doing this for 6 months or 2 years or whatever, please reach out to the show and let us know. I would be curious to know more about that. Action One said that once they became aware of this issue, they were looking around to see how other people handle it, and they couldn't find an example of people handling it, period, anywhere. So they believe they're the first ones to do something like this, but I don't know if that's true or not. I would be interested to hear from RMM vendors if they have an approach to this. The other thing that's kind of obvious here is, okay, you're using AI to spot unusual behavior in terms of people who have purchased your software. Wouldn't it potentially be great to have that AI looking at legitimate accounts for anomalous behavior that indicates somebody has broken into that RMM account? This threat actor filtering technology does not do that today, and it isn't definitively. They didn't say, "Yep, we've got that on the roadmap," but they are looking at that. Can we do that? Would that work? Is that something we can introduce next year? Because I would think that would be a really powerful addition to any RMM platform, basically, to protect MSPs and their customers.
Wow.
Very interesting. Go ahead. It's a lot. It's a lot to process,
It is. And I think, we were talking about channel accountability. And so I think, go Action One for starting some of that on the vendor side, and making sure that they are accountable for what they've built and that it's not used in a malicious way. So good on them for that. And absolutely, the other side of it, like if they can figure that out as well, I think that is a huge growth opportunity for them. As like you said, it's definitely something that's going to be needed in the industry, for MSPs to be protected. And if anything, I can definitely see some of that being a requirement later on in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Like MSP's MFA type deal, but for their RMM. So I could definitely see that being something that eventually becomes something that is absolutely required.
Yeah, more tools. It's always more tools, but I mean, you gotta have everything monitored these days, and this is just a hole that was probably really needed to be filled. So very cool. Rich, anything else to mention on this one?
No, I think we have covered that topic.
Very cool. So yeah, again, we'll put a link to this story as well. Go through and read some more of the details and go learn more about that. It's a very, very interesting story. The next up was a company we haven't really talked about in a while. But it looks like they're still out there doing what they wanted to do, and that's the 20. They have made a couple acquisitions. Rich, why are we talking about this?
I'll issue two warnings in advance, and one is I've been covering the 20 since 2016, so I'm a bit of the 20 nerd, basically. So this might be a little bit more interesting to me than it is, but we'll see. We'll see. It might actually be interesting to everyone. And Nancy, this is the story that I was waiting to ask you some stuff about in terms of your life, because I think I may be wrong about this actually, but I think the last time I saw you in person was back in the spring in Las Vegas at the Channel Partners Conference, and you were on stage with some other friends of the show, Juan Fernandez and Josh Weiss, and you were there was a panel discussion that you were taking place in, and at one point in that you know your company was acquired by Synetek, and at one point you kind of half jokingly said to folks in the audience, if you might be interested in being acquired, let's chat. So I mean, that is part of your world, basically. You know M&A as personally and well as anyone we have on the show here. And so this is a mergers and acquisitions related story. So back in 2016, when I first learned about the 20 and attend one of their events, it was basically what I called it, and some of their members would occasionally refer to it as a co-op. And so the idea is there are these big MSPs out there that have all sorts of pricing advantages and efficiency advantages, and there are big and bigger ones being formed all the time through the M&A process and with the help of private equity. And so they were kind of thinking way back in 2016, can a bunch of smaller MSPs get together and sort of pool resources? It's still, my MSP, and it's my brand and my customers. I'm not giving any of that up. But by getting together with a bunch of other people, we can have, a common tool stack, for example. And because there are a whole bunch of us negotiating with the vendor, we're going to get better prices. We can pool our money together and create a security operations center. None of us alone could possibly afford to do that. And so that's kind of how it worked in 2016, and still does for a lot of companies. We'll kind of get to that. But what has happened more recently is that as the 20, was sort of teaching member MSPs, because the 20 was formed by a guy named Tim Conkle, CEO of the 20, and also before the creation of the 20, a very, very successful MSP, and especially strong in your area, Nancy, sales and marketing. And so for years, he's been kind of teaching sales and marketing to member MSPs, but also, they've been teaching each other and learning all sorts of other techniques to get better and better at what they do. And eventually, and the first time I knew this was coming, I had this conversation with Tim was about a year ago, and he said, I'm going to start getting into the mergers and acquisitions game myself, basically. Like, I'm going to start buying member organizations in the 20 and rolling them together and creating my own bigger company. And his ambition, just because he's a very ambitious guy, he wants to create what he says will be someday the first MSP to sell for $1 billion. So he's going to be building a very large organization. And what they announced very recently is that they have acquired their 12th and 13th MSPs as part of this roll-up process. And what's significant about that is they are now at 13 acquisitions this year, which I think a lot of private equity firms and a lot of these larger companies out there would be impressed by. But it's not even just this year. They started the acquisition process in September, and they intend to acquire another 1, 2, 3 companies a month every month of the year next year, 2023. So they and I guess this is why I, as the 20 nerd, find this kind of interesting, is because I wind up covering mergers and acquisitions generally a lot. And one of the things that I hear a lot is that there is this enormous ocean of money out there looking for MSPs to buy. And there are only so many MSPs worth buying for sale. And so the biggest frustration like private equity firms have a lot of the time is just, I've got $300 million here that I've been authorized to spend, and I'm looking and looking and looking for a place to spend it. If you take the long view of what Tim did with the 20, it is this kind of ingenious sort of strategy. He spent the last 6 years farming his own exclusive little crop of acquisition worthy and acquisition ready MSPs. He didn't have to buy them and make them into great companies. He made them into great companies, and now he's buying them. And so the onboarding process, he says, for these acquisitions is very, very quick. I mean, it could take a long time normally for a big MSP to onboard a newly acquired one. He's 80% of the way there on day one. It's like the biggest hurdle they've got to clear is getting the accounting systems lined up, and there are some other odds and ends that they have to go. It's kind of an amazing thing. I don't know how important it is for the industry, but as a guy who's kind of watched this fall together over the course of the last, and all of a sudden now it's like, I'm getting it, right? Oh, now I understand what you're doing. And I don't know of anyone else out there who has something quite like this in place. So just an interesting sort of development in the mergers and acquisitions world. And I'm really curious to hear, Nancy, what you kind of think about this and just think about the M&A landscape in general.
I love the energy that you're putting out for this. I feel it. I feel the excitement. Well, because it is a big deal. I actually had seen this story on my way to the airport yesterday, and I was in the car with Myron Herrera, so the CEO of Synetek, and I said, I didn't know this was happening. And he said, I didn't either. And I said, well, you know what? It's actually pretty brilliant. You build an accelerator ultimately for small MSPs. You help them grow, and then you get to a point where it is a given that they're going to sell to you. Because they know you, they trust you. So not only did you help them build those MSPs to be more successful and all of that, and you built them in a way that it is going to be easy for you to onboard. But then also you built a relationship with them and you built trust. And so it's a given that it's going to be to you that they sell, and not to someone else that they may not know what is going to happen with their customers or their employees or anything along those lines. So absolutely brilliant.
You know, I should say, I kind of hinted at this before, but just to call it out, when I first encountered the 20, it was the 20, that was just this one organization of the 20. Today, officially, there are 2 organizations, and one is called the 20 MSP, and that's the roll up with these acquisitions in it, and the other is called the 20 MSP group, and that's the co-op, the accelerator. I really like that term, Nancy, actually, the accelerator organization, and that's still in place basically, and they've still got dozens. Well, actually, it's like 170-ish member MSPs in the 20 MSP group, and they're still recruiting members. Tim Conkle thinks they'll sort of end up staying at that 150 to 180 kind of range in terms of members. They'll kind of weed out some who don't really work out and bring in new ones and so on, but they're not shutting that part of this down. It's just distinct in terms of what it offers from this the 20 MSP.
Yeah, I think that's something that I haven't heard of as far as the industry goes with the M&A activity that's happening, but I think it also changes. It will change at least how people think about it and how they should go about when it comes to acquiring MSPs that are worth acquiring. So I can definitely see this idea that Tim has ultimately put out there and being replicated when it comes to accelerators.
Yeah. $1 billion. $1 billion. That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
That's a lot of dollars. Tim, you can say a lot of things about Tim Conkle, but the one thing you can definitely say is that he is an exceptionally brilliant guy. Really, really, really smart stuff.
For those of you, for those audience members that listen to rap, there's a song by Drake that is new, and it says more money, more problems, which we all know that term, right? But he says, give me those problems, and at $1 billion, I'm sitting there like, yeah, I'll take the problems.
Yeah. With $1 billion, you can usually afford to hire people to help you deal with problems.
Exactly.
All right, so that's gonna wrap up the news for this particular show. But Rich, we got one story in here that we wanted to talk about, and it's an interesting one that we touched on this topic a little bit in the past, um, but it seems like we've got a long road to go. But it's called the post-password future. Rich, tell us about this story.
Yeah, this is a story from our most recent issue, the most recent issue of our monthly magazine. And, you know, the word future is right there in the title. We're kind of looking down the road a little bit. But we're looking down the road to, yeah, a future in which passwords will not be required anymore. You know, anyone out there in our audience who is a big fan of passwords, raise your hand. You know, and I can just tell you right now, Matt, there are no hands in the air. Nobody likes passwords. We're all used to them. But you know, security companies and nobody likes them because they're an imperfect authentication tool. Nobody likes dealing with them. You know, weak password. We had, during our online summit yesterday, somebody on one of the panels told a story about discovering an admin password or a password for an admin account at one of their clients where the password was the letter A. You know, which that's something. You know, you hear about the word password being the password, but at least there are multiple letters in that one. So, you know, the weak passwords out there, people forgetting their password, resetting passwords, people sharing passwords with one another, people stealing passwords and selling them on the dark web. Not a great technology. And so, you know, the quest has been out there for a while. Well, what do we replace that with? And a lot of what this article talks about is what right now looks to be sort of the likeliest answer to that question. And it's built around a standard and a process called FIDO, Fast Identity Online, FIDO. And basically, this is a technology. It's sort of owned and operated by this nonprofit called the FIDO Alliance that a lot of very big tech companies are bought into and helping to fund. And it sets up a mechanism that can be used in a lot of different ways to enable password-free authentication. And so the basic idea, and I'll tell you right now, I'm not a FIDO expert, so I'm probably going to bungle some piece of this here, but this is using a public key cryptography, a kind of familiar technology out there. And so what happens is you take your smartphone, say, when you're sort of enabling it for use with various accounts that you have, and you will register that device with, let's call it Microsoft. So let's say you want to add Microsoft 365 to your new smartphone. You're going to register that device with Microsoft. And what's going to happen is once you authenticate yourself to the device, so you're going to have to prove that you are worthy of access to the device. But once you do that, a public and private key get created. The private key goes on your device. The public key goes to, in this case, Microsoft. Every time that you want to connect to Microsoft 365 going forward, the thing that's going to get you in is not a password. It's that private key on your device. And it's device specific. So you know, it's not something that can be used elsewhere. You've got to be in possession of the device. So when you try to get into Microsoft 365 from that device, Microsoft is basically going to come back and say, show me your private key. And the private key is locked, and the only way to unlock it and show it to Microsoft is for you to authenticate yourself on the device. And so if you're like me and you've got an iPhone, maybe that's the facial recognition technology. It could be a fingerprint. It could be one of these USB key kinds of things. So some non-password kind of tool that allows you to get into the device, then allows you to unlock the private key, which allows you to get into, in this case, Microsoft 365. So there's no password involved for the end user anywhere there. So that, I mean, it sounds really great. I'm sure people who, like we had Ian Thornton Trump, great security expert on the show yesterday. We didn't get into FIDO with him, but I would be really interested to hear him maybe dissect where some of the holes are in that process. He did talk about, by the way, those USB authentication devices. He's a fan of those in a lot of ways, but he said they're also pretty easy to lose, which is a problem. So that I'm sure there are issues with this. And in some ways, the bigger issues is just getting everyone bought into using this. So Microsoft and Google and there are some other big names that are bought into this now. You can use FIDO with Microsoft 365 now, I believe, but there are a lot of legacy environments out there. There are a lot of applications out there that are not enabled for use with FIDO yet. It's going to take a while to change that. There's just the unfamiliarity factor here. Like, you listen to me kind of try to explain this, and you're going to have to explain this to a lot of business owners and CIOs and stuff like that, and just get them to understand why this is worth doing and trusting. So the article kind of acknowledges and discusses all that, and then just kind of talks about, well, look, if you are not ready, or the application vendors you work with aren't ready to go post-password yet, then at an absolute minimum, make sure you're using, two-factor authentication, make sure you're using password management software. I mean, so there are things you can do to get smarter about passwords, and you should absolutely be doing that with all of your customers. But the hope is we are on a path to a future in which passwords aren't a headache or a vulnerability for anybody.
Well, that doesn't
That's
sound good. Nancy,
exciting.
what do you think?
Oh yeah, that is exciting. I won't have to make pass phrases anymore and then forget them 2 seconds later. So that's absolutely wonderful. I think for sure we want to go down that direction, and I think the adaptability is going to be much easier than 2FA. 2FA has been a pain. Not only do I have to remember the password, but now also have to take the time to grab my phone and get a code and so on and so forth. So I think that I don't have to remember anything. I just have to have my device. Great.
Yeah, but as you said, that there is some caveats to that, because like devices can be lost, right? Stolen. So what are some of the downsides of going to something like this?
Well, I mean, again, I don't haven't kind of probed the holes in this too significantly myself. I mean, in terms of losing a device, one of the nice things about it is if I lose my phone, theoretically, unless somebody can break into my phone, and then that could be an issue, but theoretically I can still get into I don't have to change a password somewhere. I'm not locked out of Microsoft 365 everywhere. I'm locked out on my phone. Because this is device specific, I can still get in on my laptop, and that presumably makes recovering from loss of the device a lot easier. I don't know. I'm absolutely certain there are problems with this model aside from the adoption problems. Off the top of my head, I don't know what they are.
Yeah, I don't know either. Nancy, you see any holes or downsides?
Well, the only thing that I can think of is if you lose the device, right? So not only that, but then also the setup after, once you recover or you get a new device. I mean, upgrading your device every year is going to be such a pain if you have to re-register for everything. So if there's like a way to register all in one place, reset your password, ultimately speaking, your what did you call it, your private key, in one go for all of your websites or accounts or anything like that, that would be beneficial. But if that's going to be a pain in the butt every time you want to upgrade your phone, that is going to be a headache.
That is,
but everything is a headache.
Yeah.
Yeah, security is a headache, right? So
yeah,
in order
exactly.
to be secure, it implies effort, right? Because if it was easy, then it would be easy. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Interesting story. We'll link off to this as well, so people can go and read a little bit more about this, because it's definitely long. There's a lot in there to digest and chew on and think about. But it could be where we're going. So go and check that out. That's going to wrap up for news and stories for this particular show. But stick around. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we've got a really interesting interview coming up with Yvette Steele. She's got a new book. We'll talk about that on the other side. Stick around. We will be right back. And we are back now with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of Channel Pro Weekly. We've got a really cool interview guest lined up for you today. She has a new book coming out that delivers a collection of practical and hands-on exercises that encourage and promote inclusion in the workplace. It's called Impactful Inclusion Toolkit, 52 activities to help you learn and practice inclusion every day in the workplace. Here to talk about that, please welcome Yvette Steele, founder of DEI Insider. Welcome, Yvette.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here and to get to know your audience. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on, and to help them get to know a little bit more about you. Why don't you take a couple of minutes and tell us a little bit more about you and kind of your background and what you do?
Absolutely. I am a longtime diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate. My work focuses on leveling the playing field for diverse groups within the workplace. I tend to focus on workforce development issues and transforming cultures so that everyone in the workplace, regardless of their level within the organization, can practice inclusion. So I like to focus on it from a bottom-up approach to complement the top-down approach that most organizations kind of live and breathe by. So if you're an individual who's looking to practice inclusion and you really don't know how to go about it, that's my focus area. And that was a catalyst for the book too, by the way. My motto is inclusion is anybody's job or everybody's job that anybody can do. And that just kind of sums it up to just to give you an idea as to how important I think this is and how easy it is for individuals to latch on and be a part of the inclusion solution.
Very cool. Now we'll kind of dive in, I think, to some of the details of the book. But you've got some history in the channel. You were with CompTIA, correct?
Oh yeah, I was with CompTIA for 8 years, and I led their Advancing Tech Talent and Diversity community and their workforce development initiatives as well. So if you're not familiar with Advancing Tech Talent and Diversity, it focuses just on what the name says. It's about creating opportunities and advancement for diverse groups within technology, helping them launch technology careers, helping leaders develop inclusive practices and cultures that create climates where diverse individuals can feel valued, heard, and appreciated, and they can maximize their potential.
Yvette, one of the things I like about having this conversation and appreciate about the focus of your book is that it dives specifically into inclusion. So, I mean, I sometimes have the thought that, for folks who are familiar with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that sort of triumvirate, I sometimes think those terms get a little bit more mysterious at each step. Like diversity, people pretty much know what diversity is. Equity, you got to think about a little, well, what do you really mean by equity? I think the inclusion piece of it is the one that is maybe least familiar to folks. So let's just start it out there. I mean, define inclusion as you teach people to practice it at work.
Absolutely. So, the dictionary term of inclusion is just simply the act of being included. But when we think about the inclusion component of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really about having organizations and behaving in such ways, having beliefs and attitudes, behaviors that lend itself to people feeling included and valued, heard, understood, so that they have a sense of belonging. It's a long-held practice and belief that when an individual feels that they're heard, they're valued, they can do their best work. And that's the value proposition for organizations that, they've now got a more productive and efficient workforce because of their inclusive behaviors and not allowing, bias to get in the way of their interactions, their stereotypical beliefs, their racist or sexist attitudes. So employers really reap the benefit of having an inclusive culture when they place inclusion at the top of their list of things to do in support of employee engagement. For the everyday employee, you know, from the help desk technician to the receptionist to the cleaning staff to the middle managers to the VPs. This is really all about your personal journey and getting in touch with who you are as an individual. What are your beliefs around diversity? How do they affect your thoughts and interactions with your coworkers, with your peers, with your staff? And then being able to, once you've done that reflection piece, understanding how that plays out in the workplace and what you can do to stop or interrupt the behaviors that are exclusive and replace them with inclusive behaviors.
So this is about as pure an illustration of privilege in action probably as there is. Only somebody who has never personally experienced exclusion asks this question. But I mean, for the sake of other people in the audience who are in the same boat as me, I mean, just if you can, just provide a sense for what the workplace experience is like for somebody who is not feeling completely included or isn't being included completely.
They feel like an outsider, like, you know, so there's this dynamic of in the workplace when you're not part of the majority culture that you have to assimilate, you have to shed parts of yourself in order to just, you know, to be a part of the workforce. For example, you know, there's a lot of pushback on the hairstyles of African American women because majority culture a lot of times feels that it's unprofessional. So in order for an African American woman to thrive within the workplace, maybe she may have to cut off her dreads or not wear braids or not wear Afrocentric hairstyles. For an individual with a disability, if they're in a position, if their disability is one that can be hidden, they may make steps instead of disclosing that so they can get the accommodations that they need so that they can be more productive and more efficient. They may not disclose it for fear of, again, backlash, stereotypical beliefs. So they are hiding a piece of themselves to assimilate with the dominant culture of being completely able-bodied. LGBTQ community members may not disclose their real sexual orientation, again, for fear of not being accepted. So in an organization that practices inclusion, you're allowed to bring your whole self to work in all of your authenticity. And that's what makes the workplace more engaging. You want to show up every day, you're happy, you're making connections and building relationships, which is all around, you know, being able to work better with your coworkers so that, again, organizations can realize the benefits of a diverse workforce. When you don't feel included, when you're going to be ridiculed, if you have to endure, adversity just to be in the workplace, you're not going to be your best self. So it's really all about, you know, teaching individuals to get in touch and connect with what their biases are, what their beliefs are. And the book actually walks you through 52 different activities that you'll encounter in the workplace. And you'll find that more often than not, that when a polarizing or a sensitive subject comes up, rather than embrace it, you run away from it. All of a sudden now you've got a meeting that you need to get to. And so now there's this air in the room or this heaviness in the room that never gets talked about. And that could cause harm because now people aren't feeling heard. So at the end of the day, once you understand how to address these situations, how to interact with them when they come up, rather than avoid it, you can embrace it. And then as a result of that, more and more people are feeling included in the workplace.
Yeah, so 52 activities, one for every week of the year.
Mm-hmm.
The book is a toolkit, which is a great thing about it, that it's not merely addressing the topic in sort of an academic sort of thing. You're providing very practical advice for addressing different dimensions of inclusion. But I will simply point out that it is also, you touch on a ton of different inclusion related topics. So, I mean, in addition to being an inclusion toolkit, this book is kind of an encyclopedic introduction, a 101 level introduction to all of the different dimensions of inclusion. You have an activity around being an ally, for example. We could spend an hour talking about allyship, right?
Yes, you
and that's
could.
just one piece of the book. But you hit all the different pieces. So like, as a starting point for anyone in our audience who wants to understand exclusion better, that is reason enough alone to check out the book. But then it really is built around practical steps you can take to get better at that. Can you provide an example or two of some activities that you recommend in the book that might be representative somehow?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought this up. Oh, I'm sorry,
Could I
Nancy.
jump in? No,
Yeah.
before you give those examples, I'm actually wondering if, so I recently went to a industry conference, and I feel like this is applicable not only to the workforce, but also within our industries, correct?
Mhm.
And so I recently went to a conference, and I was tasked with heading a roundtable conversation of DE&I, and no one came to my table. So after the event,
I'm not surprised.
someone came up to me and said, I felt bad that you were at that table and that no one went bad to it, but it's just a really difficult conversation to have. And I didn't know where to start. And I said, well, I think accepting the fact that it is a difficult conversation is the first thing, and pushing past that. So can you give one of those two examples, address maybe some of how to start a difficult conversation around DE&I? Because I think that's important if we don't even know how to start the conversation.
Right. So it's funny, I don't remember which activity it is, but to answer your question, once you've come into the reality that a casual conversation has reached a polarizing topic and you're uncomfortable talking about it, the first thing to do is to acknowledge your discomfort, and let the other person know that you're open to learning more. So in your case, for example, let's focus on specifically what you experienced. So you were at an event and you were there to have conversations about diversity, and people didn't really know, no one came to have a conversation with you because they were afraid that they may say the wrong thing or that they really didn't know how to approach it. So in a situation like that, it's important, when you're thinking about the workplace, it's important for people that you're going to sit down and talk to, is that you want to just talk about the benefits of diversity and why diversity is important for organizations. And that's a topic that is well researched and showing that diverse organizations who have a diverse workforce are more creative, they're more innovative, and they're more profitable. So should you ever find yourself in a situation like that again, that would be a great place to start, just letting people know what they're in for when they have a conversation with you. I think when some people hear the word diversity, the first thing they think about is race and have a conversation about that. And of course, they're going to run for the hills when they hear something like that, because they don't want to talk about it. And let's face it, it can be very difficult. Now, should that happen to you in the workplace where you're suddenly having a conversation about race. Let's just give you the example of, say, there's a national media attention about a hate crime around a specific group, and you have employees within your organization or coworkers who have been affected by that. They feel traumatized by it. The last thing you want to do is ignore that, because traumatized workers need to have the ability to know that if they can't leave their emotions at home, they're going to bring them into the workplace. So it's important that they have the psychological safety to be able to talk about that. And you as a coworker and being inclusive can let them know that they can be psychologically safe with you. What you want to do in order to engage is to, first of all, acknowledge that it happened so that they know that 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 you're attuned to the fact that there may be something affecting their day that day. You also want to engage with them and let them know that you care. You want to be able to show empathy and build empathy into action. So having those conversations with them around how they're feeling, asking, if there's anything you can do to help, or just offer to help, because lots of times you also need to be in tune to the fact that maybe they don't want to talk about it, but and respecting that boundary. So you can start off by just letting them know that you're aware of it and that you're here to listen if they need to talk, and letting them know that you're not there's no judgment there. Traumatizing situations happen to everybody. And in the book, I talk about specific actions in terms of what to do when that happens. So there's a term you may be familiar with called gaslighting, which is when someone's had a bad experience, instead of you acknowledging it and trying to work through it, you mitigate it and try to convince them that it never happened or isn't as bad as they think it is. So without taking you into all the steps that I talk about in that chapter, but having that one just to start with of turning your empathy into action and being able to embrace what they're saying as opposed to trying to diminish what they're saying. Because when you've been traumatized, or when you're, experiencing a racial or social injustice, no one knows your experience better than you do yourself. So being able to listen and just create that psychological safety so that they're open to talking is a great place to start. And if I may, Rich, I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier in terms of about how the book is written and how the items are very actionable. The best way to use the book, this isn't a book where you can you could, if you wanted to, sit down and read it over a weekend or weeks or a month like you would most other books. But the reason why it's called a toolkit is because it's a progression. There's lessons to be learned every single week. So each week, and this is perfect because the book is going to be released on December 20th, I think. So going into January, you pick up the book on January 1, and the first chapter is Know Thyself. And so once you've read the narrative in the chapter, there are actions that you can take to solidify what you've just read. And then after that, there's also additional, what I call action accelerators, which is additional research on the benefits of knowing yourself and how that lends itself into your interactions with people who are different from you. So my recommendation is that you practice inclusion every single week. A lot of organizations believe that, they give you a one and done workshop. You have a workshop for a half a day, you watch a video for, an hour or two, and it's just once a year. And the expectation that you're going to be able to change, values, beliefs, behavior, a lifestyle or a lifetime of behaviors in that one session is totally unrealistic. It's never going to happen. So in order to practice, to take what you've learned and practice it, you have to do it consistently. This is a skill. Inclusion is technically a skill because it's not something that comes natural to everybody, especially when you don't experience exclusion on a regular basis based on the fact that you're different. So when you pick up the book, I would encourage you to, look at the entire table of contents, just so you get an appetite of what the book is about and what your journey is about to be like. And you can go through them in a linear fashion, start at, the first one, go all the way down to 52 if you want. However, when you have a situation where, let's just say, for example, getting back to your conversation about DEI and race, Nancy, you had a conversation or you had an encounter yesterday and you thought, gosh, I really could have handled that better. how do I do better next time? Or how can I go back to this individual and reopen the conversation and kind of start all over? So if you go to the chapter that I think is called Reframing Difficult Conversations, then you'll be able to now pick up where you left off and repair any damage that might have been done, or just create a better connection where there wasn't one, because now you're better equipped. So so my advice is to use it as a toolkit, and don't try to read the book all at once. To practice inclusion every single week. It'll complement any training that you've already had. But in addition to that, it's a continuous learning process. And that's what this journey is. I've been doing this for over 8 years, and I'm still learning every day.
So maybe just to give people a sense for not just the issues that you're tackling in the book, but the kind of advice that you provide for tackling those issues. So there is, I believe, an activity in there. I'm not sure if I'm getting the name of it exactly right, but it's about amplifying voices that aren't being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can understand how that is a very important issue in relation to inclusion. What kind of advice do you give, not just to managers, but to everybody, basically, about how to, assuming everyone has bought into the idea that everyone's voice should be heard,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of advice do you give in terms of making that happen?
First of all, you want to make sure that everyone in the room has an opportunity to speak on the subject at hand. So if you're in a having a team meeting, or say, for example, like here where we are, where we're all remote, there's oftentimes people who are waiting for their chance to jump in and join the conversation, but for whatever reason they feel uncomfortable doing so, or they feel like their idea may be silly, and so they don't say anything. If everybody takes it upon themselves to recognize who all is participating in the conversation, who all, all the individuals in the meeting, and being intentional about, calling them by name and saying, hey, Hannah, I noticed that you haven't weighed in on this topic yet. Do you have any thoughts about it? And not using a how can I say, a harsh tone, but making it conversational, because the tone and the inflection in your voice is either going to make Hannah go, oh yeah, I did want to say this, or go, oh no, I don't. So being able to recognize everybody in the room and give them an opportunity to speak. I'm sure you've all heard the term mansplaining. So when a woman says something, and and then the male wants to better elaborate on it instead of letting her speak. Again, that's not amplifying her voice, that's shutting it down and amplifying your own voice. So when that happens in the workplace, first of all, if you're in tune with your biases around, say, sexism, for example, and you have a habit of doing that, the book talks about what strategies you can do to interrupt that thinking so that you don't do that. But there's also strategies there that would help you as an individual who witnesses that behavior to interrupt that, to give the floor back to Hannah, who was talking. So there's another aspect, I believe, that I talk about in that chapter, where teams should take a look at their group dynamics, and how the natural culture and the group dynamic may exclude certain voices, and to reflect on that, dissect it, and then make changes. So amplifying voices is really all about helping individuals who are part of the team, part of the conversation, making sure that they're heard at every opportunity.
So one of the things that you said right at the beginning of the conversation, which I think is important, is that this is not, inclusion is not something that is management's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility all of the time. I forget the exact name of the activity, but there's an activity in the book in which one of the concepts explained is, if you see something, say something.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could say a few words about how to make that part of how your company does business without, promoting conflict and dissension, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's one of my favorite chapters too, by the way. So, when you talked about, leadership and how, you know, when organizations call themselves creating inclusive cultures, it's usually through HR policies, practices, systems, structures, and compliance training. So like, you have the bias training and the anti-harassment training, all of that stuff. Organizations who kind of stop right there instead of having an entire DEI initiative make it difficult for individuals who see something to say something. If they see a colleague being harassed, or if they've heard a racist or a sexist joke, they may think 2, 3, or 4 or 5 times as to whether or not I should say something. The worst thing to do is saying nothing, because it perpetuates the status quo, and the offender or the person who's done that act feels like it's okay because they've never been called out on it, or maybe not even realize that it's wrong because they've been doing it for so long and no one's ever said anything. So when you, the chapter around when you see something, say something, is first of all around acknowledging the fact that, did I hear that right? Was that really, say, for example, a discriminatory act against my colleague? And once you realize that it is, and there comes this in the moment thing where you have to muster up the courage to either say something to the individual that you feel did the discriminatory act, or do you go to HR to talk about it? And if they're a person who's senior to you, chances are you're gonna want to go to HR rather than approach them directly. But if they're a peer and you have a good relationship, you might want to pull them aside and say, I noticed that you said this and did that to a person, and it comes across to me as prejudicial. I know you didn't, or I'm assuming that you didn't mean that. But I just wanted to make you aware of the fact that this is how that comes across. So having the ability to not be a bystander anymore, which happens in the workplace all the time. People see something and then they don't want to see it because they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. So if you find yourself in a situation where you've witnessed a prejudicial act, or you've heard a sexist or a racist joke, or you find that an individual with disability are being demeaned within your organization or being disrespected, how do you speak up for them? How do you make the workplace more inclusive for them? But not only do I talk about how to speak up when you witness something that didn't happen to you, I also talk about how to respond when someone has called you out on it, so that it doesn't become a conflict and more volatile. So there's a balance there. Part of the equation is, if you see something, say something, and the other half of the equation is when someone said something to you, how do you respond, so that you can take this as a learning moment, and where you've now picked up a new skill that you can use to improve interactions in the future.
Well, we are just about out of time. Fascinating discussion. But Nancy, I want to give you an opportunity if you have any last follow-up questions or anything that you wanted to add before we move to wrap.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love this topic. If anyone knows me, they know I'm an advocate, an ally, and part of the community myself, as a Latina woman in the industry and so on and so forth. So, and I definitely want to thank you for coming on here and for talking about this subject, because as I pointed out, a lot of people find it difficult to even begin the conversation. And I also want to point out that you said it's not just about race or sex. When it comes to the inclusion aspect of this, as an introvert, I absolutely appreciate when my fellow teammates realize, okay, Nancy's being too quiet here. There's a problem, so bring something up. So neurodiversity as well as personalities and things like that, and being a lot more inclusive just about, who we are as individuals. So I absolutely love it. And thank you for coming on.
Nancy, I'm so happy that you said that, because another one of the activities talks about seeing the whole person. And I think, based on what you just said, that, diving into that is going to be very beneficial for individuals to understand people's working styles, what their comfort zones are. And again, just having strategies to be able to bring that out. Like, for example, some introverts, even if you say something where you invite them to speak and you've caught them by surprise, they may not say anything, even though they have something to say. A strategy for that would be to let them know in advance, hey, we're going to be talking about this subject, and I know that this is something that's right in your wheelhouse. Would you be okay to weigh in, during the meeting? Again, that's, these little small things can make a big difference in driving inclusion for everybody, regardless of what facet of diversity they happen to fall in.
Awesome. Well, the book is called Impactful Inclusion Toolkit, 52 Activities to Help You Learn and Practice Inclusion Every Day in the Workplace. Looks like it'll be on Amazon. Probably it will be on other places as well.
Absolutely. It's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Wiley.com. And one other thing I'd like to add too, the inclusion journey is one that we shouldn't necessarily take alone. So I'm also inviting your audience to join the Champion of Inclusion LinkedIn group, so that we can connect and have conversations and form allyships to help us in our inclusion journey. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
Awesome, cool, and we'll put links to that hopefully in the show notes page so people can find those. So if you're on your phone, open up the description area, you should see the links there. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell, and open up the description area. We'll put the links in there for you as well to go and check all that out. But Yvette Steele, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll have you back sometime down the road.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. And with that, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Nancy will be with us on the other side to break down the show and have a little bit of fun and other stuff. What's going to happen? I don't know, but and you don't know either. So in order to find out, you're going to have to just stay tuned and stick with us to the end. We'll be back in just a second. And we are back now with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly of this particular episode. Great interview that we just had with Yvette Steele. Really glad she came on. Lots of good stuff that we talked about. Rich, anything you wanted to highlight from that?
Just that the whole idea, and it's a very common, familiar kind of question that comes up around DEI topics, is like, where do you begin? And I think, like Yvette said, she has structured this book. The book has 52 activities in it, but she's put them in a particular order. And so where to begin? This book is actually a nice place to begin, because it will step you through that process, and you'll take the baby steps first and then get into the more ambitious ones. Yeah.
Nancy, anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I appreciated how the advice that she gave, and then also at the end when we talked about, it's not just about race or gender and that kind of thing, but there's bringing your whole self to the workplace. And I think that for many, many years, I think many people have not done that. And so being authentic and able to express yourself and be who you are and be comfortable within your workplace is just better all around. I think it makes the world a better place.
Yeah, agreed. Well, big thanks to her for coming on and talking with us, and hopefully we get her back down the road someday. When they always write another book, right? So when the next book comes out, maybe we'll have her back then. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna have a little fun here with Nancy. The game we've been playing kind of these days, because we played 5 questions with everybody, sometimes multiple times. So we're playing versus these days. It's kind of a this or that game where we make her pick between things if she could only have the one. And we got it out earlier in the show that she's kind of a fan of rap. So I was thinking, well, what happens if we take rap away and make her choose other types of music to listen to, and she can only pick the one of the two? So and let's see what her basically would be her second favorite genre of music would be. So I will start and I will start with classical or Mongolian throat singing.
Classical. I don't
Classical
know what
over
Mongolian throat singing is.
if you
I
don't
know
you
if
have to check.
I don't want to know.
Check search that on YouTube at some point and watch a couple of them. You'll find it very interesting.
Okay.
All right, Rich, classical, over to you.
All right. So classical versus jazz.
Ooh, jazz.
Okay.
All right. We'll say jazz or blues.
Oh, that's a good. Oh, that's a tough one. I probably stick with jazz.
Sticking with
Okay.
jazz. Back over to you, Rich.
Jazz or country?
Jazz.
Jazz over country. Not a country fan, it would seem.
Yeah, very particular country fan.
Yeah, let's see. Let's say jazz or reggae.
Reggae.
Reggae. Rich, reggae, over to you.
Reggae. Okay.
Do one more each. We'll see if we can top it.
Oh, okay. And this, so reggae is our winner. She sounded like that was a relatively easy choice there. And so I don't know if this is a legitimate versus or not. Reggae versus ska.
Ooh. I'm gonna have to move over to ska.
Okay. I think she's got an eclectic taste in music. We're going ska versus polka.
I'm gonna stick with ska.
Not a polka fan. All right, Rich, last chance.
What out there could possibly beat ska that we have not touched on? Okay, how about this? Ska versus classic rock.
I'm gonna stick with ska.
Going ska. We're going ska. That's where
Never
we're
listen to
this time.
Stairway to Heaven again. You're stuck with ska.
Stuck with ska. It's sublime all day, every day. Awesome.
Yeah, my daughter would be proud.
That's awesome. Very good. All right. Well, Nancy, we'll say goodbye to you in a second, but I want to first give Rich an opportunity. I don't know if there's any case you missed it this week, but I want to give you at least a chance to kind of preview what might be coming up next week.
Well, thank you very much. There is, in fact, not. This is an off week for James Gaskin, who does our In Case You Missed It column, but he is going to be, or we do have stuff coming up, rather, next week. There will be an In Case You Missed It post next week, but there is stuff coming up in the industry next week worth knowing about in particular. And this might be the last conference from anyone in 2022 that I'm aware of, but our friends Terry and Andra Hedden at Marketopia are doing their GrowCon conference next week in, I believe, Tampa, but I know they're doing it in Florida. I'm pretty sure our good buddy, ChannelPro buddy, Joel Zadespinner is going to be there. So that's taking place next week. And then I'll say this is also happening next week. Nobody in the audience is going to be able to experience this next week, but they will experience it in a couple weeks' time. On Monday, we will be recording our second annual, this is the second time we've done it. We're going to be recording our holiday special episode of the ChannelPro Weekly podcast for 2022. And this is very, 2 years ago, we did something that we called the New Year's special, and very similar format this time around. We're inviting everybody who has hosted the show. And Nancy, I will invite you to this as well if you can make it. It's on Monday. Everyone who is guest hosted with us will come on in one of 4 half-hour segments. We've got a different topic for each half hour, but we've got, and I haven't counted up the number yet of how many people were actually available to join in, but it's a lot. We're gonna have a lot of great people who have guest hosted with us, coming on the show to talk about managed services and security, and make predictions for next year, and tell jokes, and wear holiday sweaters if you're watching on video. Where our good buddy Colleen Fry, managing editor at ChannelPro, is going to be hosting one of those half-hour segments to do a conversation about the ChannelPro Book Club, and the people who come on will each bring a book that they want to recommend. So I am looking forward to Monday. It's going to be a lot of fun, and then you in the audience can look forward to hearing that, I believe, in 2 weeks' time, Matt.
Yeah, awesome stuff. That will be a lot of fun. I'm sure everyone will check. Looking forward to that. Our awesome guest, Nancy Henriquez, thank you so much for coming on and joining us for this particular show. I hope you had fun.
Oh, certainly.
Great. And for those who want to get to know more about you, learn more about you, connect with you, where can they go? How can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, as well as Instagram, which is where I like to be most of the time. But you can also reach me at the website Synetek Solutions. You can find info about us there. My podcast, Business Plus Tech Equals Success. You can find that at businesstechsuccess.com. Jeez, mouthful.
Awesome. Hopefully everybody goes and checks that out. And of course, the place you want to go each and every day, ChannelProNetwork.com. That's set it as your homepage. Bookmark it. Go there every day. Get the latest news, articles, resources, white papers, downloads, all kinds of stuff to help you learn more about what's going on in the industry and help make your business better. And of course, subscribe to the ChannelPro Weekly Podcast everywhere it is found. It is found everywhere. Check out our 2023 upcoming event schedule. Throw that graphic up here for you real quick, so that way you can go and you can check out where we're going to be next year in 2023, and go and register for one of those. Use that code CP Weekly. That'll get you in the door for free. If you're listening, channelproforum.com/2023 should take you right to the sign up page there for those. So go and check that out. And with that, we're going to wrap episode 249. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We will see you next week.